searching out what's happening on the ground. Who do they talk to, and who can you trust? So many people on the ground in Syria, the dynamics have changed so much, so many grudges that need to be sorted out. Who do you trust? Who do you talk to? Is it the Kurds? Is it the people in Turkey? Picking the targets is very difficult. The U.S. military is finding it, of course. Sorting out this information, going through these targets, it's a very complicated affair.
Well, thanks a lot, Kyle, for your reporting. We do appreciate it. Kyle Perry is with the VOA. He spoke to us from the studio in Washington, D.C. Let's turn now to what's going on with Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, who's become the first sitting head of state to appear before the ICC. He's there facing charges of crimes against humanity. He's the first serving head of state to come before this court, so it is really a big deal. He was called to appear at the ICC status conference when the prosecution said evidence needed to go ahead with the trial was being withheld. The charges which Mr. Kenyatta denies concern his alleged role in violence following the 2007 elections, where more than 1,000 people died at the aftermath of the poll.
For the court to make a ruling which will effectively be interpreted as the court saying, if a country sticks out for long enough, obstructing proper inquiries being made by the prosecutor, despite the court having made a finding that that obstruction is improper, then the case against the person that country wants to protect will go away. Any such ruling would be capable, plainly capable, of that interpretation. And that would be a disastrous interpretation.
That the case has failed, and it has failed in a way that means there is no prospect of it going further. If the prosecutor does not intervene, you act to terminate. The prosecutor will not offer any evidence.
We'll keep our eyes on that story, bringing you more on that as the trial progresses for Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta. But coming up after the break here on The World Today, Thomas Duncan, the U.S. First case of the Ebola virus disease outside of Africa, has died. We have more on that coming up. Please join us again. Welcome back to The World Today. Now, this is a story we've covered all through last week and even for the better part of the start of the week. Thomas Duncan, the Liberian American who came into the U.S. just a couple of weeks ago with the Ebola virus disease, is dead. Duncan is believed to have contracted the virus in Liberia before entering the U.S. He'd been kept in isolation in a hospital in Dallas, Texas, and being administered with experimental drugs. Following his diagnosis, authorities began rounding up as many as 100 people whom he may have had contact with. As part of control measures, though, the United States government, Department of Homeland Security, has ordered agents at airports and other ports to observe arrivals for potential signs of Ebola infection. Much earlier today, officials did announce travelers from Ebola-affected countries will face increased security scrutiny at many of the American airports. Meanwhile, after much speculation about how the Spanish nurse might have caught the deadly Ebola virus, Dr. Madrid says there's a possibility that she caught it after touching her face with gloves after treating a dying priest, as that's what she remembers. The nurse, Teresa Romero, is the first person known to have contracted Ebola virus outside of West Africa. She treated 2 Spanish missionaries who died from Ebola earlier this year.
The Spanish health authorities are not leaving anything to chance. Besides monitoring the Spanish nurse Teresa Romero and her husband, Janviers, as well as a few others who she potentially had contact with, they plan to go as far as putting down the nurse's pet in order to contain the spread. As a result, Janvier Romero opted to appeal, but he's issued a plea for the couple's dog to be spared after authorities said it should be put down, sparking a protest outside the building. The public is not necessarily impressed with the way and manner in which the case has been handled. In Madrid, about 100 people gathered outside the Spanish healthcare ministry to protest. They are demanding the resignation of the health minister, especially because officials say they still can't confirm how Romero contracted the disease. The voices of the protesters were certainly heard as Spain's Prime Minister used a speech on Wednesday to appeal for calm.
Lo que pido es que dejen trabajar a los profesionales.
Let's allow health professionals to do their job. Let's trust them. They have an accredited prestige. Spain's health system is one of the best in the world, and what they're telling me at the moment, which is what I have to tell the public, is that this is not a disease of easy transmission. It is only transmitted by direct contact with a patient in advanced stage of the illness. And what we have to do at the moment is to be attentive but maintain calm.
Speaking outside the debating chamber, Rajoy told reporters that his government had a plan for dealing with the virus.
Y hemos fijado las prioridades. La primera, como es natural, atender a...
We have set priorities. The first one, as is normal, is to assist the person who is infected. Secondly, to watch all the people to whom she had contact, and we are doing that at the moment. Thirdly, to investigate why there has been a contagion. The transmission of this disease is not easy because the illness has to be at a very advanced stage. So let's keep calm, because I'm fully confident in the professionals working on the situation, which we are going to overcome.
She'd been helping two priests who caught Ebola in Africa and subsequently died after repatriation to Spain. A second nurse was also cleared of Ebola. A third nursing assistant was hospitalized late on Tuesday for monitoring, a source at La Paz Hospital said, bringing the number of people examined in hospital for Ebola to 5, 2 of whom tested negative.
Well, there might be much bleaker future for those who might be infected with the Ebola virus. As the World Health Organization says, medical workers are now more at risk of contracting the virus, despite the modern healthcare systems that exist in developed countries. During a press briefing in Geneva today, WHO advisor Peter Piot said control measures in hospitals could still fail in preventing people from being infected. He says even the simplest movements like rubbing your eyes is a risk now in hospitals. He was not surprised by the case of the Spanish nurse who contracted the virus outside of West Africa and expects that there will be more cases in Europe and the United States, though they might not spread as rapidly as it has in West Africa. Let's check in now on what's going on still with ISIS and the fight against the militants. Syria and Russia say that the international coalition against the Islamic State would be more effective if it indeed included Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. But VOA State Department correspondent Scott Stearns reports that President Obama's administration is determined to keep its fight against Damascus separate from the battle against ISIS.
In airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Syria, U.S. officials say they're giving Damascus no advance notice of timing or targets, while continuing to warn Syrian forces not to engage coalition aircraft. Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim says it would be easier to stop the Islamic State, which is also known as ISIS or ISIL, if Syria itself were invited to join the coalition.
Ladies and gentlemen, hasn't the time come for all of us to stand as one in the face of the serious menace of terrorist takfiri ideology worldwide? Has not the moment of truth arrived for us all to admit that ISIS and al-Nusra and the rest of Al-Qaeda affiliates will not be limited within the borders of Syria and Iraq, but will spread to every spot that it can reach, starting with Europe and America?
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says keeping Syria